more of your own. Okay. So just so you're aware that what the government has made available is missing some of the important pieces of the assessment of learning, basically. So we'll just to be aware of that, okay? So we would like you to go to your name. I'm gonna model it, if I can, and change your name. Where's my name gone? You're gonna rename myself Jan, and I'm gonna rename myself Jan, Scarborough. Oops, although I can't spell it, but. So then we will have a sense of where you are all from.
So if you just click on the participant icon at the bottom of the screen and then hover over your name, it will say more, and then you can click on more and it'll say your name, in case you're not sure.
Okay, so Matt is in Toronto and Kate is in Toronto and Allison is in Toronto. Sarah and O'Brien is in Pickering. Okay. And Sherry is in Ottawa. Okay.
Fort Erie.
We need to launch the poll now, Jan?
Yes, I think that would be good. Yeah. So we have a poll here we would like you to do. You just click on, it's anonymous, and when you're finished the very many questions, then you just submit. You click on submit, all 2 questions.
Watching the results come in is so exciting.
It is.
It's people are clicking on everything.
Ah.
So I think we've got everybody's results in.
So can you share?
I'm sharing now.
All right.
Okay.
Music to my ears that most of you picked economic thinking concepts. You have no idea how happy that makes me. Inquiry, assessment for and as, the blended, and then nobody picked other. And then, so half of you have taught the grade 12 and half of you are teaching the grade 12 and you all expect to be teaching. That's good.
It might be the same 3 people.
Yes, it probably is. Did anybody put in the chat what the other is?
No.
So we have a few who are doing the CIE. That's also exciting to know that as well. All right. Okay, that's very exciting. Okay. Zoe, it's over to you.
Okay, so today what we are going to be doing is focusing on the CIA course because that's the one that's available freely in the Learn at Home. At the end, I will share a few screenshots from my CIE course because I teach it. I have it in my virtual learning environment, but I would encourage anyone who wants to know more about the CIE course to please just contact me and I can add you to my VLE and you can have a look at the whole course right there. As Jan said already, there are a few things missing from the publicly available courses, but we wanted to give you a sense of our goals and the way that we try to re-envision this course in the online environment. So we wanted it to be inquiry-based, we wanted it to be critical thinking, to include those economic thinking concepts, and we wanted to bring in a lot more sort of diversity of representation, both in issues and the great economists and things that we'll get to in a little bit. And we wanted to include a lot more collaboration and student choice and student voice. So those were our goals when we were trying to shape this course. And we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into some of those things as we go through today. So Jan's going to talk a little bit about the economic thinking concepts to begin with.
All right, so just to give you some context, I'm quite sure most of you are aware of that historical thinking has been around for quite a long time. Ontario has it in their curriculum and also do most of the Canadian provinces, as well as, I would argue, most countries in the world. in some kind of capacity. They call it a little bit different things, but it basically exists. And when the government was looking to redo the curriculum for 2015 and 2013, for the that review, 2013 for K to 10 and 2015 for 11, 12. The geographers and the economists and the law teachers said, but we think too. Just because we're not historians doesn't mean we don't think. And then the government said, well, maybe that's true, but you don't have the same research behind what historical thinking has, the ideas of, like there's lots of academic research behind historical thinking. But the government was, I think, really brave and took a leap and said, you know what, let's see what we can do to look at the curriculum and add the economic thinking, legal thinking, geographic thinking, political/civic thinking, and I'm missing one, history, oh well, to the history, right? So, so sitting at the table, and it was both English and French, we're at the same table, really for the first time actually at the same table on the same page. And the government really allowed us to add economic thinking into the curriculum so that it's not just math and it's not just a bunch of dead white economists, it's actually the doing of economics. And so that was the big change. Is it perfect? No, probably not. Because it was the first time that we went at it, and we could hope that there's some academics out there who might do some work on it, and the next time we ever get to review it, we might have some improvements to make to it. But I think the big thing is that we're actually able to allow economics to go to the doing of economics beyond what had been some of the traditional approaches in them. So one of the things we've included is a variety of sources. Zoe alluded to that before, so not just all the dead white guys. There's actually some not dead ones, and we have some non-white ones, and even more shockingly, we have women economists in these courses. And we include the sources and different perspectives in the readings and things like that. And not just to summarize the ideas, but to critically assess through the different kinds of thinking perspectives and things like that. So here's a little of an example here, right? It's a newspaper article. There's a TED Talk. So we've also got a bit of different kinds of sources. So video, visual, primary source, text, and things like that. So the kids are actually getting to think about economics in a kind of in a doing way.
Okay, are we ready for the next one?
I think so.
Sure.
Okay. So we're only going to spend a minute on this. And that is referencing my non-dead white guys. These are Canadian. They're very much alive. And we've added these. So we actually, Zoe and I actually interviewed these economists. Actually went out and interviewed them to add the video into the courses and things like that, right? So you actually get them, and they're in different units to kind of talk about. So it's not just you do an economics, you do a unit on economists. They're filtered throughout the course, and their ideas and things like that are applied as you go. As you kind of go through the process and things like that. So that's, I mean, there's lots of them. We're going to look at some of them a bit later on in this afternoon, but I just want to kind of give you a sense that we actually got some Canadian content into our courses as well. Yes,
and
true. Yeah.
And the idea was to really address that careers piece as well. So how did these different economists use those skills in their careers?
Yes, even though like none of them are actually, well, I guess Michael Holinka he teaches economics at a post-secondary, but the others do not. So you don't have to be an economics teacher or professor if you study economics. There are many things you can do with economics, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we'll share, we have these links for you, so we'll share them after. They're a bit long, but they are in the course as well.
Mm-hmm.
Zoe.
So the next slide, there we go. The other thing that we did was, I know that, I've been teaching the CIA course for 30 years. And, we often do a whole piece at the beginning about the sort of timeline of economic thought and economic thinkers, but students don't really have any sort of connection to a lot of that. So what we did was we tried to break it down and include that in the activities where it was relevant. And we wanted students to have a lot of entry points into some of this complex theory. So we designed a widget as we called it, that's called economic thought. And it's woven throughout the course. And in each case, what we did was we provided a very short primary segment of that person's writing. So here you can see under the quotation marks, a little piece from Adam Smith that talks about value, the concept of economic value, and the water diamond paradox that he introduces. So we gave a little snippet of a primary source, a vision, and then a video. So we're going to see the video that we added.
Okay, so I'm just realizing that yeah.
And the
Sorry.
idea was to give students a window into some of this theory that has informed, economics today, but in a more accessible way, because reading, Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, written in 1776, is not accessible to students today. But this is an example of a small video that really gets at the heart of what he's talking about, but is really accessible for our kids.
Okay, so I put the link in the chat in case you're having lag or audio issues. You can just like mute us and go watch it your own. It's not very long, and I'm hoping it will play well. I really learned a lot.
So the most important lesson I ever learned about the economy didn't come from a classroom or a book or a seminar or a professor, nothing like that. It was actually a real estate lesson from a friend who's a property investor. He said, man, there's so many investors out there trying to buy the cheapest properties and turn around and make the biggest profit off of them and at the largest scale that they can, because they just see their properties as sources of profit. And they'll barely consider the other people involved unless it's constructed to them making that profit. And he was like, I used to do that, man. I was only concerned about money. It was seemed to be getting in the way of me making my profits was taking care of my tenants. It cost me time and it cost me money. So make a long story short, my investor friend had some kind of spiritual awakening and put himself in the shoes of somebody living in one of his properties, right? And he said, no, man, I'm going to make a home for people. I'm going to go above and beyond and put extra care in fixing and maintaining the property. And I'm going to check in with my residents. And if something could be better about their home, I'm going to make it better. So this is what he's been doing for years. And the interesting thing is his tenants stay longer and they take better care of their homes and his properties don't lose money. So his business is still very profitable. It's more sustainable, and it caters to the interests of not just him, the producer, but to his tenants, the consumers. So where's the lesson? How does this all come back to the economy? Well, what's the economy? It's the system of goods and services that we produce and consume. Why? Why do we produce things? We do it to sustain and enhance life, to make things better and more efficient and easier. We produce food and appliances and electronics and transportation and energy and medical services and education and entertainment and whatever else. We produce everything imaginable, and it's all in the name of helping people thrive. That's the purpose of an economy. We make products and services and pay for them so we and our communities can thrive, on paper at least. And the thing that gets in the way is greed. Businesses get so wrapped up in minimizing expenses and maximizing profits that they can neglect the human side of economics. So consumers aren't so much people with needs and wants as they are money carriers. Now, when my investor friend switched his priority from maximizing profit to maximizing value for his consumers, he found that it was the best thing for his business. It was still profitable, and it did exactly what a business is supposed to do. It helped community members thrive. That's the lesson. You prioritize value and you can absolutely still make money, and on top of that, you'll be making your world better by adding value to it. Now, we all know there's plenty of greedy people out there, and we can say whatever we want about it, but at the end of the day, we're all human, and we're all more than capable of getting greedy. But that also means that we're all more than capable of having a paradigm shift in our thinking and in our actions, just like my investor friend did. Today's business leaders are shaping and building tomorrow's economy in the way they think and the way they act. So I'm saying let's build something that isn't just profitable, but something that's valuable. And that's when we're going to start seeing our economy doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Okay, I'm just going to stop share for a bit while I get the next thing up.
Okay, sure. I can just chat for a quick second. So this is a very sort of short video. It's part of this, very beginning part of the course where we're helping to define things like what is an economy, goods and services, and this concept of economic value that Adam Smith introduces, is brought into this video as well. So I think it's a little bit more accessible than reading a whole lot of text. And that was our point, was to give kids access into these difficult concepts in ways that they could relate to a little bit better. So we're going to give you a chance to look at some of the other ones that we did. And again, what you're going to see is a lot of diversity in the economists that we chose to highlight in this way throughout the course. So we're going to be going to breakout rooms.
So we want each group to share an idea from the first thing that they went, their group that they went to. Does somebody from, I was in group 1, Kate or Allison, do you want to share something that we came up with from our group?
Okay, I'll go. We were talking a lot about how all of the resources seem really current, and they're very like applicable to current events and more than just like the dead white economist guys. And we really liked that. So there's a lot of possibility for student discussions and things like that.
Okay, good. Group 2.
Arturo, do you want to speak on behalf of our group? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I thought it would be a great way to get us to kind of go through the last unit in terms of looking at a philosopher and attaching it to economic goals of Canada or fiscal policy in terms of what kind of fiscal policy needs to be put in place. It's a great way to cover a lot more material a lot more quickly as opposed to doing it teacher-centered and putting it into the hands of the students, so that way they can create the solutions as opposed to us kind of saying, here are the solutions. It makes them more the actual drivers of the learning as opposed to the teacher-centered driver.
Awesome.
Okay. And group 3. I see Zoe's back.
Sorry, I keep getting shut out. I don't know, Matt or Sarah, do either of you want to say something?
I'll go. I think in our conversation we were talking about, we liked the particularly the graphic that was used for microcredit, and the quotes were good. It was a good jumping off point for students maybe to do their own research or to have kind of a hook for a lesson. We thought that was really good.
Okay, awesome. All right, so now for some of you who had not, in my group, they've not been in the groups before, in breakout groups before. So we're going to do another one in a second. So, but before we do that, we are going to do we're going to start looking at, so we're going to look at assessment for and as learning. And this is an example that appears in one of the activities, which is an anticipation guide, which you may be familiar with. And so what we're going to do now is we have a Google quiz, Google form for you to fill out about assessment for and as learning, for as and of learning. So if you could put that in the chat, okay, everybody. So it's in the chat, and if you click on that and then complete the form, it's anonymous, so we won't know who you are. Okay, so can we see? All right, so anticipation guide on poverty and homelessness at the beginning of a unit is probably assessment for learning, because you're just trying to see what your students might know. Although when you come back to it, it might be as learning when you're looking at when you've kind of gone through it a bit. A paragraph to explain their position on an economic system at the end of a lesson. I don't think this would be of. At the end of a lesson is never of. At the end of a unit would be of. So this would be more likely an assessment as, if you're collecting it, or if they're if you're having them give feedback on it. If you're collecting it, might be for. It kind of depends on where you are. Students create an infographic on economic systems based on learning in the unit. That is definitely assessment of learning because it's the end of the unit. Students use the CRAP test checklist on their infographic. So that's definitely as, because it's feedback. And then the last one, self-assessment. If it's self-assessment, it has to be as learning, because that's where they're giving assessment. As learning is self and peer assessment kind of stuff, right? So, but you can see that all of these activities that I have put in this survey are in the virtual learning module. So there's the first one that I put up there. Okay, so now we're going to go into breakout rooms again. And when we talk about remote learning, whether that be our current model or if it's just a blended learning model that you're doing in your class when we're not in a pandemic. Assessment for and as is really important. I mean, I've noticed as a principal right now that my students are doing my teachers give me a lot of assignments, but they're not doing as much for and as, right? And it's really helpful if they could have some for and as before we evaluate them at the end. So there's lots of those kinds of activities you'll find in here. So we're going into breakout room, second one. You'll be in 3 groups again. And if you're in group 1, you do the first one. If you're in 2, 2, 3, 3. And so is this an example of for as or learning? And you go to the chat to get on the video, but he'll be back as a process. So we'll ask each group to share something, whether it's for or as in their activity. So group 1, who is in group 1?
So Allison and Kate and I, if either one of them wants to speak, that's fine.
Yes. So I think we kind of got into the derailed and got a little bit of discussion about, but I think it was an assessment as learning. It was doing, basically putting your thoughts or your opinions on, and I didn't even get as far as to read it, but I think it might have been on poverty and that in a specific scenario. And then you read the articles and look to see, did your viewpoint change after doing those 2 readings, or did you still have the same opinion? So I think it's not something that is an assessment of learning, more as learning.
Okay. So group 2 was Sherry and Arturo. He stepped away and Sherry couldn't see it. Oh, there he is. He's back actually, right? So, so I was the recorder on that one, and we thought it was primarily for. We like this is the one where you have, if you're familiar with the political spectrum, this is the economic spectrum, and students go through like a little self-assessment to see and put themselves on the spectrum. So we argued that was probably as, because they're self-assessing themselves on that. And then the second activity was to find a headline and applying all the things that they had learned. So we thought that would be, it could be for or as, depending on what was being done with it. And we also liked it because by finding a headline, it keeps it current in terms of, you know, like the course stays current because students have to find a current headline. And I think you could argue economics has never been more relevant than it is today. If you are an economics teacher, like it's just, everything is economics as we live in our current world kind of stuff, right? So group 3, who is group 3?
That was us. Matt, do you want to speak? Go for it.
Yeah, I think we had a good discussion. We thought it was as learning. I think it was a good activity to really go through some of the concepts of theory of the firm. There was a lot of interaction. This could be a difficult first topic for students. So like, as I was reviewing it, I personally thought, wow, this is a nice way to kind of see different videos, apply it to real life. I noticed that one of the videos was really engaging. We use it too. With the 2 people in it. What's it called now? Now I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, the videos are great.
No. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it's the one where they have a whole series. But anyway, really good. But at the end, there was really reflection on what you were learning. And that was kind of key to why we linked it back to as learning, is that you were looking at what you were learning and why you were learning and that sort of thing. So it was a really good thing to use for theory of the firm.
Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see lots of great opportunities to use in your classroom to get beyond just the and the assignments, but to kind of help the students in the process of learning and kind of getting feedback as they go through. And economics is really one of those subjects where you really need to have, you know, feedback and practice before you actually do it, because it is, I always used to say it's like learning a new language. And I think for some students, and economics is like learning a new language, and so they have to learn all the kind of the short forms and the new words that have different meanings in economics, and then how they apply the concepts to real world situation and things like that. So, okay, so assessment of learning is obviously something, crash course, yes, of course. Thank you, Matt. Assessment of learning is not in the ministry public version of VLE, but that's, there's an example of one of the things that's in the course, if you had access to, would be a grasp test. with allowing for some student choice. And as a teacher, you know, reading 30 of any of the same thing is really deadly. So having different versions of something to show the same expectations is actually quite lovely. So here is one of the examples that's in the course. It's a grasp task. This is for I think it's unit 2 theory. So okay, moving on to Zoe.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I know we're running short on time. It's just about 4:30. The Learn at Home site, where the ministry has posted the content publicly, where teachers can go, does not have the grade 11 course. It was rewritten in 2015, I believe. So you can get it through your department, e-learning department, in your board, or in you know, wherever it is that you work. And again, what we did in this course is we went along with the same kinds of themes. We wanted to focus on the economic thinking. So here's an example of a cartoon in a Minds On, where we asked students to look at this cartoon through the lens of cause and effect, right? And thinking about, you know, the dollar, if you remember back in 2015, you know, was really low, and what kind of would cause that, what sorts of effects would it have? So it's not, some people say it's a really huge shift. I really don't see it that way. I think it's a small shift. Instead of just sort of looking at this cartoon, analyze the cartoon, what do you see, what's there? Just giving it a different kind of a spin. So thinking about cause and effect in this case. So there's a ton of economic thinking in this one. Again, in terms of assessment of learning, we did a lot of choice. So the next slide shows, again, we did very similar to the GRASP in the grade 12. This is a raft, if you've ever used it, where students just choose one from each column: role, audience, format, and topic. So the idea is to give students choice. It's better for them. It's better for the teacher, right? And it really highlights and gives them that opportunity to think a little bit more critically and to gain some real world skill. So it's not simply about the same old multiple choice test. It's about actually thinking about what are some skills that our students are going to be using once they leave us. So we didn't dive deeply into this one because we can't give you links to actually look at it. But as I say, anybody who's interested, you can email OHASSTA, and Sarah will forward it to me, and I can add you into my, if you have access to Brightspace, I can add you into my Brightspace grade 11 class, and you can see the full content there. So, Jan?
So we thought we'd put a little economic concept in our slide here. Zoe and I got a kick out of this one. So we hope that your Tuesday afternoon with us versus marking was definitely worth it from an economic concept point of view. So we would like you to, if you could share in the chat an economic concept to say goodbye. And then we have a couple of other slides that are follow this, just to let you know other things. So you just think of a, okay.
Or ask any questions. If you have any questions or anything that you want clarification on or want to know more about, ask us any questions in the chat as well, and we will be happy to answer.
So we also have a feedback survey. So it really helps us as we are learning how to do webinars if you can take a few minutes and just complete the survey, which I've put the link in the chat as well. So.
Thank you, Allison. Nice seeing you again, Matt. Such a small world.
And so thank you so much as you're putting in your economic, what was it, Jan, again?
Concept. Just put an economic concept in your goodbye.
In your goodbye.
Or question. Or question.
Or question, yeah.
Or next step. And so just as you're doing that, I just wanted to highlight that we will be having a virtual conference in the fall. Our theme is Hindsight 2020. We picked that well before the pandemic. It just seems a little bit more, even more so now. And we do have a member survey on summer learning and a call for presenters. Did go out in our email on Monday. It was a little bit buried at the bottom, but we'll be sending that out again soon. So yeah, so we're interested, and we will announce our summer learning soon, whether